Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of graphic novels.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, we're going to be tracing the path from, those classic comic books that a lot of us grew up with to like the more sophisticated graphic novels that we see today.
I'm fascinated by that evolution, actually.
Yeah, me too. It's more than just a change in name, right? It's a whole shift in how we think about these stories and like how powerful they can be.
Exactly. And the stories I can tell.
Right. So you've given me some excerpts that really get into the history and cultural impact of graphic novels, especially focusing on two really big ones, Watchmen and Mythos,
Two of the most influential graphic novels ever, I'd say.
for sure. Okay, so let's start unpacking this whole evolution. Like, how did we actually get from like Superman and Batman to these really complex like literary works of art? It didn't happen overnight, right?
No, definitely not. Well, it's kind of a fascinating journey, honestly. Those early comic books, like you said, with their superheroes and their serialized adventures, they kind of set the stage.
They were like the foundation.
Yeah, exactly. And then in the late 60s and 70s, you had this whole underground comics movement, which was like a totally different.
Oh yeah, like the more rebellious side of
Well,
comics, right?
exactly. They were pushing the boundaries,
Yeah.
talking about controversial stuff, experimenting with art.
So they kind of paved the way for those more mature themes we see in graphic novels,
Yeah, I think so. Like, they showed that comics could be more than just simple entertainment.
where they could tackle these bigger ideas.
Yeah. And then I think a real turning point was in 1978 when Will Eisner published A Contract with God.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one. That was a big deal, right?
Huge. It was one of the first, like, graphic novels as we know them today. It wasn't episodic like most comics. It
Hmm.
was one complete story in one volume, and it dealt with themes like urban life, faith, loss.
Wow, pretty heavy stuff for comics back then.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the format was key too. That single volume allowed for a deeper story, more developed characters, and way more emphasis on the visuals.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you can really get immersed in the story.
Exactly. So, A Contract with God really helps solidify what a graphic novel could be. But then, in the 1980s, you get two works that just totally changed the game: Watchmen and Melissus.
Yeah, those are the ones your excerpts focus on.
Yeah, they're incredible. They didn't just tell good stories, they changed how people saw the whole medium.
They took it to a whole new level.
Totally. So let's start with Watchmen. I mean, it's the only graphic novel on Time's 100 Greatest Novels list, which is pretty amazing.
It's saying something.
It really is. What Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons did was they took all those familiar superhero things, the costumes, the secret identities, superpowers, and they kind of flipped them on their head.
So it wasn't just another superhero story. It was like deconstructing the whole idea of superheroes.
Exactly. Like, the characters are morally ambiguous, they're flawed, they're not your typical heroes.
Yeah, I've heard about that. Like Rorschach, he's kind of a brutal vigilante, right?
Yeah, he's got his own very rigid sense of justice. And then there's Dr. Manhattan, who's basically a god, but he's totally detached from humanity.
It's like they're making you question what it even means to be a hero.
Exactly. And then on top of that, the setting is this alternate 1985 where superheroes have changed the course of history and the Cold War is super intense. It makes you think about how power can have these crazy, unforeseen consequences.
Wow, so it's a lot more than just capes and tights.
Way more. And there's that famous line, "Who watches the Watchmen?"
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
It perfectly sums up the whole theme of the book, like who's holding these powerful people accountable?
That's deep.
Yeah. Watchmen really makes you think about those big questions.
Okay, so Watchmen was all about shaking up the superhero genre. But Malice goes in a completely different direction,
Yeah,
right? It's dealing with the Holocaust, which is one of the darkest chapters in human history.
it's a powerful book.
Yeah, I bet. I can't even imagine how you would tell that story through a graphic novel. Like, how did Art Spiegelman even approach that?
Well, he made this really unique choice to portray the characters as animals. So, Jews are mice and Nazis are cats.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
But it makes sense, right? Like, the mice are these vulnerable creatures being hunted by the cats.
Exactly. It's so visually powerful, and it really underscores the brutality of what happened.
Yeah, and it must have been a huge challenge to balance that, portraying the horror of the Holocaust, but also using this, like, almost childlike imagery.
It's amazing how he pulls it off. He manages to capture the fear, the resilience, the struggle for survival. It's incredibly moving.
And it really shows that graphic novels can handle these incredibly sensitive, difficult topics.
Oh, absolutely. Malice proved that.
And it won a Pulitzer Prize. That's incredible. That must have been huge for the graphic novel world.
Yeah, it was a game changer. Like, before that, could you imagine a comic book winning a Pulitzer?
No way.
It shattered the perception that comics were just entertainment. Maoist showed they were serious literature.
Right. They could be just as powerful and impactful as any other type of book.
Totally. So you've got Watchmen completely redefining superheroes, and Maoist showing that graphic novels can tackle these huge historical events.
Yeah, those two books really feel like they open people's eyes to what the medium could do.
Totally agree. And their impact didn't stop there. They influenced the whole world of graphic novels.
Yeah, that's what I'm really interested in. Like, how did they change the landscape?
Well, that's what we'll get into next.
Okay, I'm ready. This is fascinating.
It's about to get even more interesting. We're going to dive into the legacy of these two books and how they helped bring graphic novels into the mainstream.
Okay, so we left off talking about how Watchmen and Maoist were these, like, total game changers for graphic novels.
Yeah, they weren't just good stories. They kind of forced people to rethink the whole medium.
Right. Like, before them, a lot of people saw comics as, just for kids or maybe a niche thing for some adults. But these books demanded to be taken seriously.
And they were. They got all this critical acclaim. Maoist won a Pulitzer. It was like the literary world couldn't ignore them anymore.
And I imagine that had a huge impact, right? Like, suddenly graphic novels are being talked about in, like, universities and reviewed in fancy journals.
Yeah, totally. They started showing up in school curriculums. It was like a whole new level of legitimacy.
It's crazy how much things have changed. I remember, like, way back, you'd have to go to a specialty store to find graphic novels. Now they're everywhere.
Yeah, even mainstream bookstores have huge sections now, and there are whole stores devoted to graphic novels.
It's amazing. But the impact wasn't just on, like, the literary world. They really shook up the comic book industry too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, publishers saw that there was a market for this, more mature, sophisticated storytelling.
Like, suddenly everybody wanted a piece of the action.
Exactly. And Maoist especially showed that you could tell any kind of story in this format. Historical events, personal memoirs, whatever.
It really opened the floodgates.
It did. It was like, okay, graphic novels can handle anything. Let's explore.
And that's what I love about them. There's so much variety. History, sci-fi, fantasy, you name it. There are even, like, cookbooks and travel guides.
It's pretty amazing. And all that variety helped bring in a wider audience.
Right. It's not just for, like, a small group of fans anymore.
Exactly. Graphic novels appeal to, people of all ages, backgrounds, everyone.
And speaking of reaching a wider audience, we can't forget about, like, the internet and how that's changed things.
Oh, absolutely. Digital platforms have been huge for graphic novels.
Like webcomics, digital distribution, all that.
Yeah, it's revolutionized how graphic novels are created and shared.
It's given independent creators a way to, like, reach a massive audience.
Exactly. And for readers, it's easier than ever to find new stuff.
It's like this whole new ecosystem for graphic novels to thrive in.
And it's constantly evolving. New technologies, new storytelling techniques. The boundaries are being pushed further and further.
So looking back at the whole journey from those early comic books to where we are now, it's pretty wild, right?
It is. It's like a whole transformation. From simple superhero stuff to these deep, complex narratives.
Okay, so let's talk about what's happening now. Like, the current trends shaping the future of graphic novels.
Well, one thing I'm really excited about is the focus on diversity and representation.
Oh yeah, that's so important.
We're seeing more graphic novels by creators from, all different backgrounds sharing their stories and perspectives.
And it's such a visual medium, right?
Yeah.
So the art itself can be really powerful in conveying those different experiences.
Absolutely. And these diverse voices are bringing so much fresh energy to the medium, pushing the boundaries even further.
And what about, like, format and style? Are there any interesting trends there?
Definitely. There's so much experimentation happening. Some creators are like blending genres. Others are blurring the lines between fiction and nonfiction.
And I've even seen some that, like, incorporate multimedia elements.
Exactly. It's like anything goes. There are no rules.
It's so cool. The possibilities are endless.
They really are. It's a very exciting time to be, a fan of graphic novels. It's such a dynamic medium.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about Watchmen and Maoist. But, those are just two examples. There's this whole vast universe of graphic novels out there. What are some others that you think have been, like, really influential or groundbreaking?
That's a tough one. There are so many. But, okay, one that comes to mind is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
It's her autobiography about growing up in Iran during the Islamic Revolution. Really powerful stuff. And her art is incredible. It's black and white, very stark, but beautiful.
Sounds like a must-read.
It is. And then there's Jimmy Corrigan, The Smartest Kid on Earth by Chris Ware.
I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's really ambitious, very sprawling. It explores themes of loneliness, isolation, searching for connection. And Ware's art is amazing, so detailed and innovative.
Okay, adding that to my list. But, for someone who's new to graphic novels, it can be overwhelming. Like, where do you even start?
That's a good point. There's so much to choose from. Yeah.
But I think the best thing is just to explore. Think about what interests you, what genres you like.
Historical fiction, sci-fi, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. There's a graphic novel out there for everyone. It's like, go on a treasure hunt.
I love that.
Yeah, it's an adventure.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. From the origins of comic books to the rise of graphic novels, the impact of Watchmen and Maus, and we even talked about what's happening now, all the exciting trends.
It's been quite a journey.
It really has. But before we wrap things up, I have one final question for you. Knowing all that you know about graphic novels and how powerful they can be, what advice would you give to someone who's never read one before?
That's a good one. I think the most important thing is to be open-minded. Don't let any, preconceived notions about comics hold you back.
Like, don't think it's just for kids or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Graphic novels are a legitimate form of art and literature. They can tell stories that are just as, engaging and thought-provoking as any other medium. And they can even be more so, right?
Right.
Because you have the visuals working together with the words.
Absolutely. So yeah, my advice would be just dive in, explore, be curious. See what you discover. You might be surprised at what you find.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Just dive in and explore. There's a whole world waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. And it's a world that's constantly evolving and changing.
It's been really fun exploring it with you today. Kind of wrapping things up here, we started with those classic comic books, with their superheroes and their serialized adventures. And now we're seeing these incredible, complex graphic novels that tackle all sorts of themes and push the boundaries of what storytelling can be.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
We talked about how underground comics kind of challenged the conventions and paved the way for something new.
Yeah, they were definitely ahead of their time.
And then, of course, A Contract with God came along. And it was like, okay, this is what a graphic novel can be, a complete story in one volume, really focusing on the art and the visuals.
That was a game changer.
And then came Watchmen and Maus, which completely blew everything open. They brought mainstream recognition to graphic novels and showed that they could be just as powerful and as meaningful as any other form of literature.
And they really paved the way for the diversity we see today, all the different genres and styles.
Right. And with digital platforms and new voices emerging all the time, the future of graphic novels is wide open. The possibilities are kind of endless.
Totally agree. It's a really exciting time to be a fan.
It really is. So my final question for our listeners today is, now that you've gotten a taste of this world, what graphic novel will you dive into next?
Oh, that's a great question. It's like, what adventure are you going to go on?
Right. Maybe something historical, like we talked about with Maus and Persepolis.
Yeah.
Or a memoir, a personal story that really resonates with you.
Or even a graphic novel adaptation of your favorite classic novel.
Oh, yeah. That's a whole other world.
There are so many options. So I encourage everyone listening, go explore those bookstore shelves, those online libraries.
Or your local library.
Yeah, exactly. Find something that sparks your interest and just dive in.
That's the best way to discover new things. You never know what you might find.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of graphic novels. We hope you learned something new and maybe even got inspired to check out some of these amazing works for yourself.
It's been a pleasure talking about this with you.
Likewise. Until next time, everyone, happy reading.